Internet, Dret i Política, organitzat pels Estudis de Dret i Ciència Política de la Universitat Oberta de Catalunya. Aquesta és la 5a edició d'aquest congrés i per això vull començar felicitant els Estudis de Dret i Ciència Política de la UOC per la feina feta i per haver aconseguit consolidar aquest fòrum anualment de reflexió acadèmica, professional i social sobre les conseqüències de les tecnologies de la informació i la comunicació en l'àmbit del dret i la política. Enhorabona, doncs, a tot l'equip de professorat dels estudis, als diferents grups de recerca i investigadors implicats i també, òbviament, al personal administratiu que ho han fet possible. Potser un dels factors que han contribuït més a la consolidació d'aquest congrés i al seu èxit és precisament la forma en què les diverses edicions han sapigut conjugar l'interès acadèmic i la rellevància social dels temes tractats. El tema central de la present edició, les anomenades xarxes socials, és sens dubte un clar exemple d'aquesta voluntat. No només es tracta d'un fenomen que ha aconseguit guanyar una gran repercussió social en els darrers anys, ni que sigui només pel descomunal nombre d'usuaris d'aquestes xarxes, sinó que també està generant molta activitat en l'àmbit de la recerca i en especial perquè fa les seves implicacions polítiques. Només cal recordar que en les darreres eleccions presidencials nord-americanes la campanya d'Obama, el candidat guanyador, va fer un ús molt intens i innovador d'aquestes xarxes i també pel que fa a les implicacions jurídiques, donat que qüestions que ja estaven tradicionalment vinculades a internet, com la privacitat, la protecció de dades o la propietat intel·lectual, s'han tornat a replantejar i potser redimensionar en aquest nou context de les xarxes de comunicació i intercanvi que anomenem xarxes socials. Voldria acabar agraint a tots vostès la seva assistència a aquest congrés i també donar les gràcies en nom de la UOC a tots els ponents que participaran avui i demà a les diferents sessions, alguns dels quals, com saben, han hagut de fer llargs viatges i el que de vegades és més difícil trobar forats a les seves atapeïdes agendes per ser-hi aquí. Espero que tant la seva participació al congrés com la seva estada a Barcelona siguin molt profitoses. Moltes gràcies a tothom i dono la paraula al professor Agustí Cerrillo, director dels Estudis de Dret i Ciència Política de la UOC.
Gràcies, Eduard. Gràcies també per haver acceptat un any més presidir la inauguració d'aquest congrés IDP. Benvinguts a tots i a totes a aquest 5è congrés d'Internet, Dret i Política, que aquest any, sota el títol La cara i la creu de les xarxes socials, persegueix crear una plataforma a través de la qual al llarg de 2 dies puguem tots plegats discutir, analitzar les conseqüències que les xarxes socials tenen en el dret i en la política. De fet, és una satisfacció per nosaltres, els organitzadors d'aquest congrés, la bona acollida que novament ha tingut aquesta iniciativa impulsada des dels Estudis de Dret i Ciència Política de la Universitat Oberta de Catalunya. Aquesta és la 5a edició en la que mantenim aquesta vocació, d'una banda, de canalitzar cap a la societat els fruits de la recerca que dia a dia anem produint als Estudis de Dret i Ciència Política de la UOC i, d'una altra banda, ser un punt de trobada entre experts, acadèmics i professionals al voltant del que és l'àmbit en el que es centra la nostra recerca, com és l'impacte en el dret i en la política de les tecnologies de la informació i la comunicació i en particular d'internet. En ocasions anteriors, la nostra atenció s'ha centrat des de qüestions com la criminalitat informàtica fins a la web 2.0, passant per l'administració electrònica, el comerç electrònic, la propietat intel·lectual o la protecció de dades de caràcter personal. En aquesta ocasió hem centrat el nostre focus d'atenció en les xarxes socials. Crec que avui en dia és per tots coneguts la importància social i tecnològica que representen les xarxes socials. Només cal llegir habitualment els mitjans de comunicació o consultar ja algunes estadístiques públiques per veure com aquestes xarxes tenen un impacte important a la societat, particularment en alguns sectors de la societat, però que cada dia es van eixamplant. Això no obstant, tot i l'important i l'interès i l'extensió que tenen les xarxes socials, la veritat és que generen algunes qüestions que des de la perspectiva del dret són o han de ser objecte d'anàlisi. És veritat que hi ha un ús molt important de les xarxes per difondre informacions sobre les persones, per difondre fotografies, per difondre imatges, per intercanviar opinions i pensaments, però la veritat és que darrere de tots aquests intercanvis, darrere de tots aquests contactes que es poden generar i que es donen a les xarxes socials, hi ha una regulació que en alguns moments no permet satisfer plenament i garantir de tota manera la seguretat jurídica i els drets de les persones. I és precisament en aquest punt en què volem centrar bona part dels debats que es duran a terme al llarg d'aquests 2 dies, en particular a la sessió d'avui. Al voltant de les xarxes socials, i tot i destacant la importància que estan tenint a la nostra societat, per tant, al voltant de la cara, la part positiva, la part amable de les xarxes socials, volem analitzar d'una manera rigorosa, acadèmica i científica quines són les implicacions que tenen en el dret i veure si el dret està actualment a l'alçada de donar una resposta a tots aquests reptes que generen les xarxes socials. Per això, avui hem programat una primera conferència en què, amb el títol Saving Facebook, es pretén donar una primera visió sobre l'impacte que les xarxes socials, en particular a través de l'exemple del Facebook, hi ha en els drets i llibertats dels ciutadans i també quines són les mesures que es poden adoptar per fer front a aquestes implicacions. Posteriorment hem organitzat una taula rodona en la que hem demanat a diferents professors, tant catalans com estrangers, que valorin quina és la implicació que tenen les xarxes socials en els drets individuals, des del dret a la imatge o a l'honor fins als drets de propietat intel·lectual. A la tarda centrarem la nostra atenció en analitzar amb deteniment un dels principals aspectes afectats per les xarxes socials, com són les dades de caràcter personal. I aquests efectes hem organitzat una taula rodona en què des de diferents perspectives, tant jurídiques com tecnològiques, valorarem quines són les implicacions i quines són també possibles solucions per fer front a les implicacions que les xarxes socials tenen en les dades de caràcter personal. En la sessió de demà centrarem la nostra atenció en quin és l'impacte que estan tenint les xarxes socials en un altre àmbit, no tant el personal, l'individual, com el més propi dels poders públics. I per això hem organitzat tres sessions en les quals valorarem quins són els usos que actualment s'estan fent de les xarxes socials per part de les institucions públiques. D'una banda, en la primera sessió del matí, ens hem proposat veure com les xarxes socials estan esdevenint un canal a través del qual els poders públics, en particular les administracions públiques, difonen informació pública als ciutadans. I també observarem com a través d'aquestes xarxes socials no són només les administracions públiques les que difonen informació pública, sinó que també els propis ciutadans esdevenen difusors d'informació pública a través d'aquests nous mecanismes. Com ara apuntava fa un moment l'Eduard Eibar, en la darrera campanya nord-americana, al novembre de l'any passat, les xarxes socials van ser un instrument activament utilitzat per als candidats i en particular pel candidat Obama per fer la seva campanya electoral. En la segona sessió de demà al matí, precisament analitzarem quins són els usos que es poden donar a les xarxes socials per facilitar i incrementar la participació política. Finalment, demà també volem veure les xarxes socials des d'una altra perspectiva, en particular des de la perspectiva de les polítiques públiques. I, en concret, volem analitzar quines són les polítiques que actualment estan duent a terme els poders públics per garantir la seguretat de les xarxes socials. Si bé hem anat destacant les potencialitats que tenen les xarxes socials, els usos que estan tenint i fent els ciutadans actualment de les xarxes socials, a ningú se li escapa el fet que també estan tenint conseqüències negatives. I, per tant, cal que els poders públics adoptin mecanismes, que adoptin polítiques que garanteixin un ús segur de les xarxes socials, un ús que faciliti el lliure exercici dels drets i les llibertats per part dels ciutadans i que no generin noves dificultats, nous problemes en els ciutadans que vulguin gaudir de les implicacions positives que tenen aquestes xarxes. Bé, aquesta és l'estructura del nostre programa, que confiem que satisfaci els seus interessos. Hem previst que cadascuna de les diferents sessions vingui distribuïda per unes primeres intervencions per part dels ponents. Aquí els hem demanat que siguin estrictes en l'ús de la paraula, de manera que es pugui facilitar al màxim el debat posterior entre tots vostès. El que volem, com els indicava fa uns moments, és que aquest congrés sigui una plataforma de discussió i debat entre l'acadèmia, els experts i els professionals que treballen al voltant d'aquesta matèria. Per tant, sobre la base de la informació, de les reflexions que facin els diferents ponents, els convidem a que participin activament en el debat aportant les seves idees, les seves preguntes o els seus comentaris sobre el que s'hagi explicat per part dels diferents ponents. En aquesta ocasió, a més, hem introduït una novetat respecte a l'estructura d'altres anys, i és que cada dia, al concloure la jornada, farem, en particular el professor Dret, farà unes conclusions sobre les principals aportacions que s'hagin fet en aquesta jornada. El Congrés IDP és un congrés sobre la xarxa, que a més també està a la xarxa. I a aquests efectes hem previst que es pugui seguir tot el que es va dient al congrés a través de diferents canals. Hi ha alguns professors presents a la sala que van actualitzant constantment els seus blogs amb la informació i les conclusions, les idees que es vagin presentant aquí al llarg del dia. També alguns d'ells aniran utilitzant el Twitter i llançant al ciberespai informació a través del hashtag IDP2009 sobre les idees que es vagin aportant per part dels ponents i també dels assistents. Lògicament, hem obert el nostre espai al Facebook i confiem en que en els propers dies les ponències estiguin penjades al YouTube. Finalment, també comentar-los que tenim previst recollir algunes de les comunicacions i les ponències que es presentin al llarg d'aquests 2 dies en el proper monogràfic de la revista Internet, Dret i Política. Aprofito per recordar-los que tot just ara fa uns dies s'ha publicat el número 8 amb un monogràfic sobre el software lliure i que tenim previst, com els deia, que en el número 9, que es publicarà cap al mes de desembre, es reculli un conjunt de ponències i comunicacions que s'hagin presentat al llarg d'aquests 2 dies. Bé, només em queda, per concloure i donar lloc ja a la primera de les conferències, agrair a totes les persones que s'han implicat activament en l'organització d'aquest congrés, els professors dels estudis de Dret i Ciència Política per l'organització de les diferents sessions, el personal tant de la universitat com en particular dels estudis, l'Isidoro, l'Antonio, la Diana o el Biel, que han estat dia a dia facilitant que tot això pugui funcionar. També volia agrair particularment a l'editorial Tirant-lo Blanc per el seu suport, la seva col·laboració en l'organització d'aquest congrés, lògicament els ponents per haver acceptat amablement participar aquí. I finalment volia tenir un agraïment en particular a la persona d'en Pere Fabra, que ha estat durant les 4 edicions anteriors, en la mesura en què era el director dels Estudis de Dret i Ciència Política, l'impulsor d'aquesta iniciativa, de la que en aquesta 5a edició el pres jo el relleu, i agrair-li també la seva implicació al llarg d'aquests anys, que ha facilitat que any rere any haguem pogut millorar i consolidar aquest congrés. Finalment, agrair a tots vostès la seva assistència, convidant-los novament a que sigui una assistència activa i participativa i, per tant, que aprofitin els espais que hem previst en cadascuna de les sessions per poder intervenir activament en aquest congrés. Moltes gràcies a tots i espero que aquest congrés sigui interessant per tots vostès. I bé, convido al professor Grimmelmann perquè s'afegeixi a la taula i ja inicia la primera conferència. It's okay for you here?
I have to say, I have never been at a conference at which the first session started early. I'm quite impressed by this. Thank you, organizers, for having me here. Thank you all for... and I'm looking forward to starting off our conversation today. I'm going to be talking about Facebook as an example and privacy as an example, but I think a lot of the themes will be broadly applicable to our other conversations about individual and public rights, about the spread of information, and particularly about the ways that people use social networks and their reasons for doing so. So my theme, very directly stated, is that people have profoundly social reasons for turning to social networks. It's right there in the name. These are social network sites, and that these motivations are visible in all of the patterns of use and in a lot of the privacy harms that can result from uses of the sites. And we have to keep this very much in mind when looking at how they work and how we might avoid some of those risks. So I'm going to give you a motivating example, and this is not actually initially drawn from social networks at all.
Go stride your whip.
So this is a video. This is two gentlemen engaged in a practice called ghost riding the whip. They are dancing around nearby a moving car, and you will notice that one of them is the driver. So this is a car that has no driver, and this is apparently for them enjoyable. This is, as you might expect, a particularly dangerous hobby. Here's another gentleman engaged in the same thing. But let's turn from, you might ask, why would somebody do something so self-evidently dangerous? And to focus purely on the technology here, to say that there must be something wrong with cars if people can misuse them this badly, would be a category mistake. In fact, this is a social practice. People are doing it because of the chance to impress each other. They're doing it because they're with their friends and getting egged on into doing dangerous things. And to really make progress on preventing this dangerous practice, we would really need to pay attention to these social factors. And so the same thing goes for the privacy risks involved in social network usage. This is the homepage on Facebook of the Ghost Riding the Whip Association, a group for people who like to engage in the practice of riding around on cars that have no drivers. And this, you might realize, raises exactly the same kinds of risky behavior issues that Ghost Riding the Whip itself does. Because here are these people doing something both stupid and illegal and publicly boasting about it on a social network site. So we need to really inquire carefully why it is people would do something so self-evidently risky to their privacy. So my plan for the next half hour or so is to talk about social network sites and why people use them, and how they use social factors, social heuristics, to think about the privacy risks involved, and then how the privacy harms that result are in turn themselves deeply social. I'll then turn to three questionable, I call them solutions, ideas that people have proposed in various ways for eliminating some of these harms, and I'll show that they don't really engage with the deeply social nature of the reasons people use social networks. And then I'll draw some very unfortunate conclusions. So let's start by thinking about why these sites are social networks. So what do these various sites have in common? You may recognize here a lot of the well-known international social networks. There are ones that are popular more in Europe than in the US. You also have highly specialized ones like Tackle at the top left, which is a site for high school athletes, and at the bottom right, Ravelry, which is a social network dedicated to sharing knitting patterns. And this extraordinary range of sites has to have some core set of attributes, which I'm going to borrow a definition from Dana Boyd and Nicole Ellison, who've argued that social network sites are defined by three things. They have profiles for individuals, they have links among those individuals, and they let you see and browse the social graph that we all belong to. So let's start with the profiles. This is my Facebook homepage. You can see on it many of the typical features of a profile. There's a photograph. There's some status information at the top, in which I talk about what I'm up to. And you have a list of other information that's about me. This is my stating myself who I am on the web. And not all of the profiles on social networks are this straightforwardly informational. The profile is really about crafting an identity for yourself. So while MySpace homepages are notoriously ugly and unreadable, this one still says a great deal about who it is, author is. You have a picture of him here with one of his friends making gang signs. He's probably not actually in a gang, but it's a kind of cool that he's adopted. He says, "What can I say? I am your typical guy and I love it. I love sports, going camping, of course women, beer, and food." And you have him basically say here, saying what matters to him. It's not being said in a straightforwardly, these are the facts, this is my age, and so on demographically. But it's sending messages that are very intelligible to people in his social group, the ones he hangs out with, the ones he cares to impress, saying to them, this is who I am, this is how my profile reflects me. Of course, some of this information can also be fictitious. So we have here a Friendster profile for somebody called Beer Goggles. And the idea is here both that somebody out there is saying that my identity is that people look more attractive to me when I get drunk, but also other people can say, this Beer Goggles person is a friend of mine, and when I'm friends with this person, then that says something about my identity too. It's something I have in common. The first fakesters like this on Friendster were colleges. There was no way to say, in a way that let you affiliate with other people in your university, this is where I'm going. But by adding your university as a friend, you were able to add that facet to your identity. And so when you look at the sites, in fact, lots of the things on your profile, the activities you engage in, actually say a lot about you. And you're doing it to express your sense of who you are in relation to the other things. So here's my page again. I have my friends here. My friends are an important part of my life. They show who I'm affiliated with and what matters to me. We have here the causes and groups that I'm affiliated with. You can see some of my politics there from the fact that I'm a fan of Barack Obama. Above that, you have a list of groups that I belong to that include both individual societies I belong to. There's my high school stage crew, for example. It's an affiliation that says something about me. We have at the top my saying something pithy. I'm always trying to impress people with my clever Twitter posts and Facebook status updates. Again, these are about me saying to the world who I am. Links. So we want to add various people. Here I am considering whether or not to add Larry Lessig as a friend. And links are central element in social networks. You can meet new friends. Here's an example from LinkedIn, which is all about business networking introductions. Or you can connect with old ones. This slide shows Facebook with 4 separate ways to find old friends. You could search through your address book. You could get suggestions of people in the network. You could search for people by name. And you could scrape your IM for addresses. And all of these are about adding new depth to your already existing social relations. And so social links are also about not just who you are, but what your relationships are. Here we have a slide that shows Urs Gasser, a well-known cyber scholar, and he's linking up with friends. He is friending people that he knows. He is complaining about how it's Monday, and other people are commiserating with him. He is hearing back from people he's recently seen. and he is having people say that they like the things he's posted. All of these activities are actually constitutive of social friendship. They are the ordinary, daily, small interactions of friendship and relationships. Then we have the social graph. I can see not just that Mikhail is a friend of mine, but I can see who his friends are. So I can browse around from him to others who are near him. And this has some interesting characteristics. First, there are network effects. Each of the Facebook pages has a box showing you who your mutual friends are, friends that you have in common. So as more people join, friends of friends join, and there's a natural commonality to being on the same network with everyone else. There's also a chance to declare membership in communities, to be part of a collective, not just I or you, but us. So we have support groups for internet addicts. We have fan groups for supporting various politicians and people in various situations. And we have lots of frivolous, informal socializing. These are just 4 of the thousands of Facebook groups about monkeys. Now, by adding people as friends, this becomes almost a status game of accumulation. On the right here, we have Michael Arrington's friends list. He has almost 5,000. On the left, we have Barack Obama's fans and supporters list. He has over 6 million supporters on Facebook. And then one of the other pleasures of having a social graph is that you can actually graph it and visualize. This is my friends network, and it gives me some actual new insight on where I am as a social animal in relation to the communities I'm a member of, to be able to see them all grouped around me by the place from which I know them. So to summarize these social motivations for using Facebook, we have profiles, which are about oneself. We have links that are about relationships with others. And we have a whole social graph, which is about our place in larger communities. So since people's reasons for using social networks are so social, we shouldn't be surprised that people use social heuristics for thinking about the privacy risks. They don't do so dispassionately. They use the same kinds of reasoning that lead them to think about risks in everyday offline social life. So, for example, people give in to peer pressure. People say, if all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you? In fact, when it comes to social networking, probably they would. That you judge how risky an activity is by whether your friends are willing to do it. In this case, if everyone else is jumping, the water must be deep enough to hold them, right? There's also a sense that anything that is filled with many people must be safe. The risk that something bad will happen to you must be small. Safety in numbers. This is, in many cases, a smart strategy. If you're part of a large flock of animals, the predator won't eat all of you, probably just one. Social networks also activate our sense that we must be among people like us and together. So if I send you a message on Facebook, there's at least some sense that we're talking face to face, and therefore that we're safe, there's no one else around. That's I suppose what this couple here is thinking. They're safe because there's no one else around, but zoom in more closely, and we can see there's somebody back in the bushes there. And this is, in fact, what life on a social network is like. There's always somebody else on there with you. And those people, we think that they're all like us, that there's nobody in here in the henhouse but us chickens. But in fact, by taking a broader view, we realize that, in fact, no, not everyone in the group shares our values or is exactly like us. Facebook used to be for college students, then expanded to high school students, graduates, and now for everyone. And as it has, the norms have shifted. By dealing with our friends in what seem like social contexts, we think that we know how to trust them. We think that we recognize them and that we are seeing them as they really are. But in fact, this can be a misleading identification. That if we have a face, we may be too trusting, and we may therefore give out personal information in a context in which we otherwise wouldn't. Electronic mediation also leads us to overestimate how much other people we can count on. Here, this parent and child polar bear are probably linked in secret keeping by their family relations, the close personal context. But online, it's well known that people feel both too quick to trust and insufficiently willing to respect the confidences of others. And finally, the electronic setting may make us think that we are capable of seeing what other people are doing with our personal information. But again, this may be a kind of overconfidence, that in fact we can't see all of the things that they are doing. And that says, up here, silly, the cameras are pointed in the wrong direction. So to summarize, there are a wide range of social reasons that we think we understand the privacy risks of using a site, that we think it's relatively safe to put information about ourselves on them, and the information will stay reasonably confined among a small group of friends where nothing bad will happen to us. But these are heuristics. They're not careful evaluations of the fact that this information is now out on servers. These are not thoughtful dispassionate analyses. These are the same social cognitive shortcuts that we use in other walks of life. And online, they can go badly, badly wrong. So let's talk about some of the ways in which our privacy can be harmed in a profoundly social way. That when you use a social network site, private information can be misused in ways that affect privacy. I'm following roughly a taxonomy from Daniel Solov's Taxonomy of Privacy. I'm going to tell you about 6 different kinds of harms that I see. The first is disclosure, when information is presented to an audience you didn't want it to reach. So let's start with this photograph. This is Bono from U2, cavorting with people who are half or maybe a third of his age. These photos wound up on Facebook. One of the girls in the picture posted them. She posted them in a way that she could only share them with her friends and her close networks. Unfortunately for her, one of those networks was the City of London, and the information leaked out quite broadly because of that. Here's another example from Facebook. One gentleman, a college senior, listed as a hobby on his profile smoking blunts, that is, smoking marijuana cigarettes. Now, unfortunately for him, one of his potential employers looked at his profile and saw this interest and promptly revoked their job offer to him. He didn't think the information would get out to employers, but it did. This is Sandra Soroka, an otherwise unremarkable, ordinary Facebook user, who decided that she was going to break up with her boyfriend via Facebook. So she changed her status to say, Sandra Soroka is letting Will know it's officially over via Facebook status. Well, this status update got sent around to a lot of her friends. One of them took a picture of the update and forwarded it to other people. It ultimately wound up on the gossip blogs, and millions of people have now found out about her. And then, of course, social network sites have become favorites of law enforcement. You can go on and you can look up information about people. I have an alert right now on cases in the US that discuss social networking sites. And I would say that there are about 5 cases a week now that get to this level of judicial decision in which the court reports on something to do with a Facebook or MySpace profile. That is, it might be a child custody hearing in which the status of one of the parents is discussed because of things they said on their profile. Or people might say, I never met him in my life, when the cops then can come in and prove that, no, you've been trading Facebook updates for weeks. There are cases about witness tampering, cases involving sentencing. Lots of information people wished they could keep secret is being revealed in context in a court of law that they might not like. Over and above the harms from information being disclosed itself, there's also surveillance. This is the harm of being watched, even if the information itself is not misused. So there's something about being watched that's creepy, that's disorienting, that is a privacy harm. The panopticon is a problem even if nobody inside the prison has their information misused. The mere sense of being watched all the time is an intrusion on your sense of freedom, on your scope of action, on your sense of dignity. I have here a Transport of London poster meant to reassure people that they're being watched permanently. Unsurprisingly, many people found this profoundly creepy. One great example of this on Facebook is the news feed, the real-time update of things that you are doing. That when Facebook rolled out this new feature, information that had previously been available but only to those who went to look was now being rolled out in real time to everyone you knew. They could see every single thing that you were doing automatically pushed out to them. I have here a picture of a Chicago Tribune column, which was a short story in the form of Facebook relationship updates. So we have here that Jennifer and Kevin have been dating, as the story is established. And then we find out that Amy friended Kevin. Kevin is attending the event, Amy's 25th birthday bash. Kevin was tagged in Amy's album, Friday Night at Barleycorn. Amy has super poked Kevin. And then we now find out the response that this draws because Jennifer has found out through watching the newsfeed updates what Kevin is up to. Jennifer wrote on Kevin's wall, "Who in the F is Amy?" And then Jennifer has received a gift from Kevin. "Whoa, whoa, it's not what you think, honey." Jennifer has wrote on Amy's wall, "You tramp." So we have both the fact that Kevin and Amy's budding new relationship was betrayed through this continuous real-time surveillance of the newsfeed, and also the kind of voyeuristic peering into somebody else's life in real time that the newsfeed enables. And we might be concerned about the surveillance nature of both of those. There's a third thing I call instability, which is the fact that assumptions about a social network at time 1 may become false at time 2, leading to privacy harms. So this is a Facebook public search profile. Facebook used to be a completely private network. You had to be a member to see other people's updates. Now, if you Google for me or many other Facebook users, one of the hits you get is their public Facebook page, a page that's in all of the search engines. That didn't used to be true. People may have had pictures they didn't want to see out in public getting revealed this way. Another example here is Facebook Beacon, about which I'll have more to say later, which broke the internet by linking information from sites in a way that no one had ever expected. And then, of course, there are Facebook viruses now, things that spread that try to steal your login and then use Facebook to propagate themselves to your other friends. Again, these are insecurities, vectors of attack that didn't previously exist. One of the most interesting social features about privacy harms on Facebook is disagreement, in which you and I have a disagreement about something social that we didn't realize existed until it was made manifest in the network. So, for example, this is a photograph of me from Facebook. I didn't post it, and I didn't say that it was me in this photo. Instead, somebody who was at a conference with me posted this photo. And you'll notice that at the bottom, I've circled in red a link that says, remove tag. That's basically an option I have to tell Facebook, don't say this is me. Don't let me be searchable. And you can think about why I need to have that link for privacy reasons, because otherwise all sorts of photos of me could be out there and linked and associated with my name in a way I might not like. But you'll note that I can remove the tag, but I can't remove the photo of it at all. That photo could still be up there, and it's a good thing I'm not doing anything more embarrassing in this picture. Another form of disagreement is to ask how you have to make friend links explicit. So I have to decide explicitly, is Mikhail a friend of mine or not? And if I think he's my friend, but he disagrees, then suddenly he's in the difficult position of saying, well, do I want to reject James's friend invitation or not? It would be embarrassing for me to not regard him as a friend. And so you get situations in which people agree to be other people's contacts, expanding the circle of who can see private information. And then LiveJournal and MySpace have had issues with top 8 features, in which you say, who are your top 8 friends? If you can imagine a feature that asks users to name their top friends on a service that's widely used by teenagers, you can imagine the kind of drama and fighting that result as people jockey for position and dispute who gets to be whose top friend. Again, the network's design almost seems calculated to unleash these pressures of disagreement, privacy violation, and breaches of each other's dignity. A fifth category is spillover. My decisions can have consequences for your privacy. And so by being on a network site at all, you've given up some control over your identity to everyone else. A study of LiveJournal found that you could predict with high accuracy somebody's age and nationality just by observing the age and nationality of other people they link to. So yes, you can hide the information yourself, but that doesn't mean it still can't be observed by looking at you. Of course, when I'm your friend, my picture will show up on your page as a link of your other friends, which means that people who are not just my friends are seeing my picture, but in fact, people who are friends of friends or further out. Your privacy choices, how private you make your profile page, affects who can see my information. And the same goes with if I'm open to friends of friends, then your choice to friend somebody else now chooses who can see my information. And this matters a lot as the number of users on social network sites takes off. Facebook now has 200 million users worldwide. That has enormously different privacy consequences than when it was a small site with a few hundred users at one college. And my final category is denigration, or you could think about this as being a defamation or attacks to persona. Here, somebody's use of a social network site directly impugns the dignity of somebody else who's using it. This is a video clip of one of my favorite pieces of culture about Facebook, a BBC video called Facebook in Real Life. This gentleman here is holding a can of spray paint because, of course, he's about to write on your wall. And the idea is that the unflattering things he spray paints on your physical wall are akin to the unflattering things that somebody else writes on your wall. Other users of Facebook and other social network sites control your self-presentation. They can affect how you are seen. Of course, then, there is this 102-year-old grandmother. She is the oldest known Facebook user on record. And the things that she sees on your wall from your friends' writing. You now have a collision between different groups of acquaintances, different social contexts. When those are brought together, those can have the effect of forcing people to self-censor and divide. The fact that I know that there are my students out on Facebook reading my profile causes me to use it in a different and more restrained way than I would have a few years ago. And let me talk a bit about Beacon. Beacon was a program that Facebook launched a couple of years ago that would take your activity on other sites and push it through to your Facebook profile. So if you bought a book at Amazon, or you edited a recipe at Epicurious, or you rented a video from Blockbuster, that fact would show up in your Facebook newsfeed, and all of your friends would be told, James just bought this book, Would you like to buy it too? Click here. So suddenly, Facebook had transformed all of its users into unwitting pitchmen, to being shills to sell products using my persona, my name and my photograph, as advertising material. And I may not have wanted to have my name linked in that way with these products, maybe private information about them being associated with me, but also I might not want to lend my endorsement value, the publicity value of my persona, to those products in that way. So let's think about how some kinds of crudely caricatured solutions might deal with these harms. And I want to suggest that solutions that don't take account of the privacy values involved, that don't take attention of the social factors affecting social network site use, these solutions can go badly astray. So, for example, privacy policies. A common thought about how to fix defective consent, lack of missing information, make everybody read a privacy policy, and then they can be properly informed about the privacy risks of using the site. Well, here is Facebook's privacy policy in all of its glory. People don't read things this long. It would be irrational of them to read all of this. And there's actually studies showing when people do read Facebook privacy policies, they are less informed as a result of it. They understand what can happen to their information less. Even if you did read it and did understand it, this is what it says. The bottom line is, therefore, we cannot and do not guarantee that user content you post on the site will not be viewed by unauthorized persons. We are not responsible. You understand and acknowledge, at your own risk. This privacy policy promises nothing. Nothing at all. Or how about technical controls? So, Facebook offers you an extensive set of settings to control who sees your personal information. You can say that some things are shown to nobody. Some things only to your friends you've individually added to the site. Some things should be available to anyone. Well, there are a lot of problems with these things. Only 20% of people, 1 in 5, has ever changed the Facebook privacy settings from their defaults. Technical rules don't solve social problems either. I don't necessarily know in advance who I want those photos tagged of me to be shown to until I understand what those photos actually consist of. Innocuous photographs of me at a conference, sure, show the whole world. But when somebody else posts a photograph of the post-conference drinking, maybe I don't want that to be shown widely, but I couldn't have possibly thought about that distinction until it happened to me. And then, of course, there's the problem of ambiguous relationships, that I don't have in mind a clear sense of who all of my friends are, that categorizing them as being contact or not contact is a very crude filter for assessing who I want to see this detail or that detail. And finally, there's the problem of friends you can't trust, that you can add a contact, and that contact may turn out to be unreliable. So all these technical controls are great, except that a survey found that over half of people in England were willing to add this plastic frog as a contact. And once they added this plastic frog, the people behind the plastic frog had access to all of their personal information. And that information could have been leaked out to who knows where. A third thing people talk about in the context of social networks is data ownership. The idea that you should be free to take your information and move it to wherever else you want to go. So this is the logo of data portability, who stands for the proposition that sites should not lock up data. You should be free to export it and take it to another site. Thus, we might think, if Facebook is bad for privacy, let's all just take our information and decamp for MySpace. And that will cause market pressures that restrain Facebook's behavior and make it act ethically. Well, this guy here, Robert Scoble, tried. he used a product called the Plaxo Pulse Screen Scraper to take data from Facebook and import it into Plaxo. He wanted to switch from one network to another. Facebook responded by banning his account. And Facebook had a very good reason for wanting to do that, which is data portability means data smuggling. This parrot here is saying, hey, hey, you want to buy a Rolex? And the image I mean to summon up here is the idea that if you empower people to export information from a social network site, they can export other people's personal information. If I can take the list of my contacts, the fact that I am your contact was itself a piece of personal information about you, not just about me. And you may not have intended for me to talk about that fact in any context other than the original social network. Any information that I could gather about you, if made portable from a social network, now is freed from whatever constraints that network had on privacy and control. If Robert Scoble can take his full list of contacts and all of their information to Plaxo, he can circumvent all of Facebook's privacy-protecting rules. So data portability, in fact, means a deeply decontextualizing set of risks to privacy. In the paper, I talk about some other solutions that won't work and some things that may work, but I don't want to sort of poison the discussion yet. I'd rather learn from other people here today about their ideas for solving some of these problems. So I'm going to leave those aside. If you're interested in more of the details, you can look at the full paper. It's online. Link to my homepage, Saving Facebook, and you'll find it. Instead, I'd like to offer 3 themes that I think characterize the mess of privacy on social network sites. And these are difficult problems. And I'd be very interested to see over the course of today and tomorrow what other people have to say about confronting some of them. The first thing that worries me is that the deeply social nature of these sites makes it very hard to partition off good from bad behavior. The social reasons people use these sites and the social mistakes they make in thinking about the privacy risks and the social nature of the privacy harms that result are all deeply, deeply linked. It's the same mechanisms, the same sense of you and I are connecting with each other in a meaningful way that underlies all of this. People use these sites for valuable, deeply fulfilling interactions with others. But the very personal nature of those interactions means we activate the parts of our brains that don't think dispassionately about consequences, and also mean that we are at risk in parts of our lives that matter a lot to us. And I see no good way of separating those facts. Social network sites are, by their very nature, deeply risky. The second problem is that these are peer-produced privacy violations. I have here a Pogo cartoon with the classic slogan, "We have met the enemy and he is us." These are privacy violations that are not imposed upon us by powerful entities who are watching our every move. This is not the government watching us. These are not large corporations that are gathering extensive profiles on us and using them for marketing. Well, I guess it is that too, but these are not dossiers being drawn up by the powerful to watch the weak. These are instead individual users meeting up and collectively invading each other's privacy. These harms flow from the social interactions among peers, among rough equals, who are all now empowered to hurt each other's privacy. So these are, to use Yochai Benkler's phrase, peer-produced. They're not produced through a process of rational top-down organization. They are bottom-up, emergent privacy violations that happen almost naturally in the presence of a social network site. And the third worrying theme is that Facebook is in some sense a privacy virus. It spreads from person to person using social mechanisms of contagion. I just found this great site. Come on and use it. Join me with it. We spread these to our friends and our social networks. We encourage each other to act in risky ways on them. And then, like a true virus, it also uses the mechanisms that we use to think about privacy against us. We think we're among friends in the site. In fact, we're in a very large network of friends and strangers and millions of other people. So it turns our privacy defense mechanism against us in the process of infecting us in ways that will spread personal information outside. So I'm not entirely optimistic about what we can do about social network sites and improving privacy on them, but I look forward to several days of conversation about tackling this problem. And now I would be delighted to engage in conversation with you about these ideas and these themes.
Thank you for interesting presentation. Disposem ara d'uns 20 minuts per obrir el torn de paraules, la seva participació. Els agrairia que quan intervinguessin primer es presentessin. Començar sempre és difícil. Sí, aquí, sisplau.
Hi, my name is Miquel Peguera. I'm a professor of the Law Studies, WOC. And I would like Professor Grimmelmann to talk about the possible solutions, talk about solutions that might work, the ones he deals with in his paper, and also I find particularly interesting these risks with data portability. Just 3 weeks ago or something, a group of experts, the Article 29 group in data protection, European group that helps Commission to deal with data privacy, precisely recommended to foster data portability as a means to tackle privacy risks in social networking sites. Thank you.
So the thing that I have been most excited about, I think over the last 6 months or so, as a range of not a complete solution but an enormous step, is better default policies. I've seen actually a series of increasingly sophisticated proposals, one from Lillian Edwards and Ian Brown in the UK, and one now from actually a college student, Chris Peterson in the US, that recommend better default setting on social network sites for privacy settings. Many of the examples I talked about involved people who had misunderstood the consequences of what Facebook is set to do by default. So the idea that sharing with your networks is something that you want to do is actually something that most people don't want to do, given how networks work on Facebook. And so setting your information sharing not to go to networks, these collections that you belong to, universities, geographic locations, things like that, but instead only to people you have affirmatively added as friends, seems like a better choice in mirroring what people would actually want to do with the site. And the same goes for a lot of those individual settings on that page I showed you. It's possible to make the default a lot more sophisticated in mirroring how people would probably think the site would be used. So I'm an enormous fan of having sites, either voluntarily or through some kind of mandate, set their defaults in a more privacy-friendly way. This doesn't mean setting things so that information is always totally locked down, but the better you can match how the site works to how people think that it works, the better off we are. The second thing that I think is incredibly important is not changing behaviors midstream. It's okay to add new features. That's a very important part of social networking sites, is the pace of innovation they've enabled in communication and sharing. But existing ones should continue to work the way that they did when you started using them. New features should be essentially on an opt-in basis, that you start using them and then it starts working. And Facebook has a terrible, terrible track record here of rolling out new features on an opt-out basis. Newsfeed, that panoptic real-time survey of what you're up to, they just turned it on. Everybody woke up one morning and suddenly everything you were doing was being plastered everywhere. They did the same thing with public search pages. They gave you a warning that would happen, but you still had to opt out in order for it not to avoid it. And I think it would be better off if most of these changes were made on here's something new, we hope that you will use it, we invite you to, we're going to make it easy, but we're not going to put you in it without your knowing, and we're not going to alter features in ways that distort your privacy up front. And I'll just say, on the question about data portability that you also raised, I think it's a very, very hard, difficult question. There are people who are working very hard on open social and on standards for migration of information among sites. And in fact, there's something extraordinarily appealing about not being tied to a provider, because if you realize that the provider is acting in a way that hurts your privacy, you should be able to shut down your involvement with them without cutting yourself off from the social network itself. There's the idea that the graph that you're part of should somehow be abstracted and removed from the control of any one intermediary, because that reduces the threats that that intermediary itself can pose through misuse of information. My caution is just meant to say that we don't want to be completely empowering the individuals either, to the extent that what they have power over is not just their own personal information, but other people's personal information. And I think this problem is much harder in the social network context than it is in more, say, commercial settings, where it's much easier to say that this datum pertains to one individual, and that individual is the one who should be given complete control over enabling or vetoing uses of it.